All right, we're going to go ahead and do, and I'm going to go ahead and present my talk on, well, fairies. And this is a pretty large topic. So we're going to cover quite a bit. And before we even jump into fairies, we have to talk about uh, how fairies fit in a little larger picture. And the larger picture, of course, happens to be what is called elementals. So we have to enter there, and then we'll go a little bit focused because we will understand fairies and the context if we don't know what elementals are, right? Uh, so any discourse of elementals must begin with the understanding of what is called animism, which of course invariably connects with these spirits. Now, a long time ago, Edward Tyler, an English anthropologist, he's a pioneer of religious evolution, introduced the word animism into academia. He defined animism as a faith in the reality of spirit or soul residing in all things. In fact, he believed that animism was the first building block for all the religions around the world. That's how it began, right? They're all animistic at first, so that there is no separation between that which is spiritual and physical when it comes to the realms, right? So the spirits or souls not only exist within humans, but they exist in animals and plants and stones. And even a spirit resides within the natural phenomena like lightning or thunder, rain, wind. Spirits inhabited geographical locations and various features. They were within mountains, within trees and rivers, and springs and bogs, and even minerals. All of them were designated in the minds of those back in the Paleolithic age and the Neolithic age as sacred because of it. Okay, so animism. So there's a spirit in all things, right? All things are vivified by this presence. Now, there's been some qualifications. A certain Nick Herbert, he was born in 1936. He's an American physicist. He actually kind of built on this idea, and he asserted what's called the quantum consciousness assumption. And basically, the idea is that consciousness is a part of the physical world, not an emergent property or a special biological or compartmentalized system, right? So everything is consciousness. So on top of all that, not only is there happen to be like a spirit within all things, but all things has a consciousness. You know, it is maybe even self-aware at times, right? So that is animism, and so that's kind of the building block. Again, as I said before, eventually, what's going to happen is these spirits who are occupying these various forces within the physical world will start to receive certain positions. You know, a certain hierarchy will be created. They'll have personal names, and they'll evolve from just simply nature spirits. Some of them will evolve into gods and goddesses, each with their unique aspects and occupation, right? So these are the first elementals, of which, of course, fairies will become part of eventually. Well, as this process of categorization of the natural world occurred, many were understood as occupying general groups of spirits, eventually becoming known as elementals later on. In many cases, these spirits were understood in relation to what later became understood as the four elements of earth, of air, of fire, and water, right? And so then, of course, they'll be related to planets and stars and signs of the zodiac, hours of the day and night, right? Elemental spirits possess supernatural powers. They are usually, maybe, usually invisible to humans. These elementals are living amongst trees and rivers and plants and swamps and mountains. They are attached to every living thing. So how do you connect to these nature spirits that are within all things? Well, many within the ancient world, shamans connected with these nature spirits. So shamans. So shamanism, there will be they will communicate with these nature spirits in order to better to able to survive, right? So you're thinking to yourself, hey, life is tough in the Paleolithic era, in the Neolithic era, right? It is, it's about survival of the fittest. So humanity needs every advantage it possibly can gain, right? And you have, a problem, and that is the weather, right? The weather changes. It's unpredictable. And how are we going to find food? We have to keep moving from place to place to find food, to find shelter, to be safe. And so, one way to, in a sense, guarantee the safety is to appeal to or do rituals with what they believe are spirits within nature. So various shamans and others would try to create this communication that, hey, can you help us? Can you nudge the natural world a little bit so that we can have an advantage to make sure that we secure that food source and that water source, and we find that shelter, and we're not eaten up by by a saber-toothed tiger, or or not trampled by some mammoth, right? Can we do that? And so humanity will harness some kind of relationship with these elementals, right? So you're going to have not only a shaman is going to be within each group, but you're going to have some kind of like a hinge person too, intermediary. Sometimes it just depends. Sometimes it's a group, sometimes it's an individual. Okay, so there you have that. Now, eventually, elementals, within the concept of animism, will evolve into what's called pantheism. Now, there is a big difference between animism and pantheism, but so many people get the two mixed up. You see animism and pantheism as two sides of the same coin, and they're really not, right? So you have some societies that are animistic, but are not pantheistic. So animism is not the same as pantheism. So, right, okay, so here it is. While animists believe, you may want to write this down. While animists believe everything to be spiritual in nature, animists believe everything is essentially spiritual in nature, right? They do not necessarily see the spiritual nature of everything in existence as being united, right? As it is in pantheism, right? Animism places more emphasis on the uniqueness of each individual soul. Meanwhile, in pantheism, everything shares the same spiritual essence rather than having distinct spirit or souls. So pantheistic ideas, are come about, emerge during the time of the Greeks. Why is this important? Because as we go into the realm of fairies, right, there is a concept that connects more to animism, but not always pantheism. In fact, oftentimes not. So these fairies, these other groups within that concept, dwarves and elves and whatever, brownies, right? They are not all connected together. Sometimes they're opposing parts, right? So that's important to remember. Now, many different belief systems. So, I mean, we're going to be focusing on Northern Europe. I just kind of want to kind of go a few other places real quick. Like uh, Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia, they had these kinds of nature spirits. Um, Ancient Samaria, for example, and these nature spirits, um, they were vaguely defined and they changed shapes and were connected with various aspects of nature. Some were winged bulls or lions with human heads, right, or various composite forms. Sumerian deities never lost their connection to these earlier spirit groups. Of course, ancient Egypt had began its so much of its ideas based upon elementals, right? Have the primordial waters of Nu, right? The abyss and the ancient ocean surrounding the essence of life, much like a liquid bubble or primeval egg. Nu, both masculine and feminine, with a male side called Nun, depicted either as a frog or a man with a frog head. Female side called Numet, shown as either a snake or a woman with a snake head. And then Atun emerges out of that, right? Primordial ocean. And then all of a sudden, you get the personifications of Shu, of air, and goddess Tefta, of water, and so forth and so on. So once again, you have these elementals, right? These elementals can be found in India, right? So if we go off to India, we see that there are Yakshis and Yakshans, right? And these again are spirits of nature, right? Uh, and what's interesting about them is that they seem to have connections even with some of the folklore of the realm of Europe, right? So, for example, you're going to have the female Yakshis are sometimes very seductive and beautiful women with saucer-shaped eyes, black long hair, very widely articulated hips, and extremely narrow waists. Or these, just like these have many of the spirits in Europe, or conversely, they can be vile and like creatures, right? So yeah, so yakshas can turn into rakshas. They can turn into like demons and monsters. They have both sides, and we're going to see this with fairies and other fairy folk. You're going to see that they have two sides. They're able to morph from one to the other. So there you have it, right? And of course the same thing goes for the others as well. So it's interesting because oftentimes you see them with their feet leaning up against a tree, right? So this is within ancient India, right? Okay, and of course, obviously, you're going to have the Yakshans who are portrayed as handsome and strong warriors, but sometimes are also depicted as great monsters with gaping mouths and doors and protruding bellies. So there's quite a diversity there in depictions. You're going to have this also of these spirits very much within Shintoism. You're going to have this in China. You're going to have this all over East Asia. You're going to have these spirits all over the Americas. Elementals, they're everywhere. Nature spirits are to be found very much in the beliefs of the indigenous peoples of the Americas, right? So where do we go from here? Well, there's two more groups I want to look at briefly, and that is we got to remember what about Arabia and East Africa? Who do you have? You have the jinn, right? Or the name, of course, meaning to hide or to conceal. And they are literally beings that are concealed from the senses. They are originally pagan nature spirits and connected to various elements spread out throughout Yemen, Somalia, Ethiopia, as well, of course, as Arabia. And these jinn find their way into the Quran. And of course, the Hittites and the Luvians have these spirits, and the Greeks and Romans. The Greeks and Romans have the Idaean dactyls, for example, spirits originally earth elementals. And these are considered agents of magic, and musical notes, and metal workers, right? Idaean dactyls protected baby Zeus from the devouring father Kronos after Rhea gave birth to him, Mount Ida. So you have these. You have, of course, the Greek and Roman nymphs. The Greek and Roman nymphs also connect in many ways to these elementals of the north, except, of course, they are female spirits of the natural world, minor goddesses of forests and rivers, springs and meadows, mountains and seas. Uh, these nymphs were believed to provide a life force for growing trees, flowers, and shrubs, their inherent energy, um, nurturing wild animals and birds, and they're maintainers of grottos and springs and brooks and wetlands. All of this contributes or connects to areas further to the north. Of course, you have freshwater nymphs, you have tree forest nymphs, and so forth. Sea nymphs. Greek and Roman philosophers try to figure these out. Empedocles, uh, basically, he had the idea. He lived from 490 to 430 BCE. He's a source of the classical idea that the universe is composed of four elements, right? Earth, air, fire, and water. He described these elements as roots, attributing each to a god. Earth with Hades, air with Hera, fire with Zeus, and Persephone with water. The two forces that mix the four elements into different combinations were described as love on one side, which is responsible for the attraction of different forms of matter, and strife on the other side, which is the cause for their separation. So in the beginning, love held the four elements together as a perfect sphere, while strife was all along the perimeters of the sphere. With the separation of the four elements, earth became the ground, water became the sea, air became the region about them, above them, and fire became the sun and the stars. And so the idea or the hope is that eventually love will defeat strife and they'll all find their way back. Of course, you're going to have people like Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa will go into the four classes of spirits corresponding to the four elements. And so, so that will continue on these, he'll Christianize certain ideas, and of course, Paracelsus and so forth. And then, of course, you're going to even have the mermaids, right, of the north, right? Although mermaids were not always that good at first, and they got better later on. But let's move on. So you see, there's a context here. So fairies are, right? They are connected to the elementals, and so often they're associated with the air elements. Now let's jump into fairies proper. Now that you have a nice introduction, and we will go from there. So to start off with, elves and fairies often intertwine. They do, and so sometimes they'll call elves fairies and fairies elves. So we kind of have to investigate this a little bit more. So the word elf is found throughout the Germanic languages, and originally meant white being, or a being that is white. And so we kind of reconstruct this using the Old and Middle English and medieval German as well, and Old Norse. And they're associated oftentimes with Norse mythology. Unfortunately, they're known to cause illnesses. They're associated also with magic and with beauty, right? After the medieval period, the word elf tended to become less popular within the Germanic languages, and it lost out to an alternative, which I find is very interesting. The alternative was like dwarf, which means dwarf. I know this doesn't go very well for those of you who love Lord of the Rings. You see elves and dwarves. It's not necessarily working together. Although if you've read, Tolkien's Silmarillion and his ideas, there is a connection. But so yeah, dwarf also Hudra, hidden being in Scandinavian. So, and in many cases, even the word fairy was substituted for elves. So just want to mention that. So the elves were part and parcel of a pre-Christian Europe, and many of the oral traditions from the Germanic and British, and Slavic, and Norse, only later recorded at different times, reveal these elementals in many cases. The earliest surviving manuscripts mentioning elves in any Germanic language happens to be from Anglo-Saxon England, of all things, from around 400 to 1066, where elves are most often mentioned in medical texts. Why are they mentioned in medical text? Well, which attests basically that the elves afflict people with diseases. That's not that romantic. I'm sorry. you know, they make humans sick. They make livestock sick. Apparently, they really kill sheep. So, and they also cause internal pains and mental disorders. Legolas would not be very happy about this. So, but what happens here is that, in fact, I do want to mention that the idea that elves caused illnesses lasted for a very long time in all places, Scotland, and so there you have it. And so anyway, around with the Royal Prayer Book around 900 CE, the word elf appears as a gloss for Satan. So, in the 10th century, there is what's called the Icelandic Cormac Saga. The Cormac Saga gives an account of various sacrifices. These are the sacrifices that were done to appease the elves in order to heal a wound in battle. So this is a little bit more positive that, hey, if elves can make you sick, maybe elves can also make you well. And so there you have it. And so it goes as follows. I'm going to give you the prescription. It says, a hill there is, not far away from here, where elves have their hunt. Now get you the bull that Carmack killed, and redden the outer side of the hill with its blood, and make a feast for the elves with its flesh. Then thou wilt be healed. So you have here, which is obviously a bull sacrifice that's placed on a hill, perhaps a sacred hill or sacred mountain. And so this is meant to heal a wound. Now there, get really entertaining pretty quickly. There's a travel log that survives from around 1020 CE. It's from Sigvatur, love that name, Sigvatur the Skald. What a skald. He was a court poet for Olaf II of Norway, and he mentions what's called a Alphablot. An Alphablot is basically an elven sacrifice. It's, again, 1020 CE. And it takes place in the southern part of Sweden. So after a journey, Sigvatur and his companions arrived at a homestead called a Hof, and they expected to receive a nice greeting. Hospitality was important, but instead the doors remained shut. In fact, in one case, he tried to get in, and he could only stick his nose in the door, and they shut it afterwards. So he just kept going on to the next house because, hey, he wants to have a place to stay. So at one farm, he met a lady who told him to go away and said, don't go further inside, unlucky man. We are afraid of Odin's wrath. We are pagans. Then she chased him away as if he were a wolf and said that they were having the Elven Sacrifice at the homestead. So they're having an Elven Sacrifice. Well, this Elven Sacrifice, what do we know about it? Well, it happened at the end of autumn when the crops have been harvested and the animals were most fat. But we don't know much else. We don't know exactly the details. They were kept mysterious. We do know a few things here and there. We do know that the presiding head of the home, who is connected to the life force, was called Alver, which means beard. So I guess he's called Beard. And I don't know why the head of the household's called Beard. But again, it's a big mystery, right? Now we have, of course, the Codex Regius, which is written in the 13th century, but that is preserved through something that about 1643, but it's still earlier. And we have what's called the Prose Edda from the 13th century. Well, this is fascinating. Here we have two kinds of elves. We have the Doklafer, which are the dark elves, and we have the Nejolsfor, which are the light elves. Okay, so there are two different kinds of elves. Now, the Doklafer, these are these dark elves. They live within the earth and are very have dark skin, and while the Lotussfor, they live, they're fairer than the sun to look at. And so they live, in a sense, above the earth. So there are two different kinds, right? Now, what I think is fascinating is that the dark elves are sometimes misunderstood as being confused with dwarves. And so the dark elves more and more become understood as dwarves. Isn't that fascinating? So as a graduate, so they're both elves. You got the light elves, you got the dark elves, but the dark elves who live underground will be associated with the dwarves as time goes on. So there is this evolution. Okay? So moving right along. And of course, you have the trolls. And the trolls will then be an outgrowth from the dwarves. So you're going to have these trolls, and they're said to be larger than humans, though, much stockier. They're strong and brutish. In fact, images show them with prominent noses and heavy brows. They eat humans, or at least when they can find them. They're dim-witted. They're usually guarding something. These trolls, like a bridge or a treasure trove or gold or jewels. But they have a big weakness, and that is in sunlight, they will turn to stone. So they always have to be in the darkness. There's one place in Norway called Troll Tentern, or Troll Peak. It's very craggy, and it looks like all of these human or anthropomorphic shaped hills. They all look. And the story is that there was a great battle between these various trolls going on, and they were so consumed with this fight that they forgot that it's going to be daylight soon. And as the sun rose, they all turned to stone. Okay, so now we move on to fairies. Okay, so you kind of got the general idea, even though elves and fairies are interrelated. Fairies. Okay, so fairies typically as an elemental are associated with air, even though they're really connected with water and earth and fire in some cases, like the Will-o-wisp, right? So, but there you have it. It's interesting because the name fairy itself is derived from the vulgar Latin word fata, and which means fate. So the name fairy is connected to the word fate, and with a with an extra ending. The extra ending is this abstract noun ending, which is an eerie, E-R-I-E, right? And so it enters Old French as fay or fee, right? Referring, though, in Old French, specifically as a woman who was skilled in magic and knew the power and virtue of words. They knew the power of stones, and they knew the power of herbs. And yes, of course, they knew the future as well, which in turn is fate. It's referred to a woman. It's not referred to something that's mystical or spiritual per se. Women doing spiritual things, yes, but much like a wise woman, right? Much like a cunning man, right? That's the idea. That's how it began, right? So now, also the word fairy was oftentimes used as a descriptive, as an adjective, or active as a verb, right? So it was to fairy was an illusion. To fairy was an enchantment. That's what it means. So, and what will happen is that eventually there will be this idea that the fairies are those who enchant us. Yeah. So these are the enchanters. Well, what I think is interesting is that the word fairy, there's different ways of spelling it. Some people spell it Fairy, and some people spell it as is Fairy or IE. So there's two different spellings. Which is the most original? Well, the most original is the A with the E. That is the most original. So this one is the earliest references to them, right? Well, so you get this idea of enchantment. So they are enchanters. So this will then be, now you see how this works. So the idea of enchantment will then be connected to those spirits who enchant. So they're ferrying these spirits. They are enchanting spirits. See, and then eventually it transfers over to they themselves are called fairies. You guys got that? So it's a gradual evolution. I think, as I cough, I think it's fascinating to me how these words gradually evolve, right? Now, the earliest reference to fairies, as we know them in England, arrived from the historian by the name of Bervas of Tilbury. Gilvas, he lived from 1150 to 1220. But having said that, it's the 13th century. It's the first mention of fairies. It doesn't mean that fairies didn't exist before that time. In fact, obviously the belief in fairies, but not being called fairies yet, goes all the way back to the Paleolithic and into the Neolithic age. I mean, all the way back in Northern Europe. These are just simply nature spirits that then get this name as being enchanters, and then, of course, fairy proper. But yes, they existed, or the belief of them existed long before this, right? One interesting bit is that many people say that the fairies are connected to earlier peoples before the migration of the Indo-Europeans. We'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's interesting because they also say that they're the people that are occupied many of these places that were short in stature, that were there before the Iron Age, which may connect to the idea of why fairies are are um, are afraid of iron, right? Because this represents those who are the newcomers, so to speak. So there you have it, right? Okay, there is other theories too. So one theory is that the little people were actually a historical memory of the Picts, who were shorter of stature and who apparently also used to live underground at times, right? So the Picts lived in northern and eastern Scotland, beginning around the late Iron Age and continued to occupy the area up until the 10th century CE. These Picts were associated with indigenous hill fort buildings and so forth. And so some people say, well, the Picts are connected to the early history of these fairies, right? And there's a few other interesting bits and pieces that we have to keep in mind, right? And it's very controversial, as we can imagine. We do know that the pre-Scandinavian inhabitants of the Orkneys, um, known as Papai or clerics, and Patti, which means Picts, we do know that they were very short of stature. They were very short, in fact, and that they thrived in the Orkneys during the Neolithic times to around, around 3,200 BCE, right? But then around 2,500 BCE, they the village was abandoned. One of these villages, and what will happen is at 1850 there was there's this great wind that took the top of this buried village and revealed that these people were very short in stature, but they were replaced by other people that arrived later on in a new migration. So a lot of people say that there is a historical backbone to the fairies. Okay, let's continue on and let's just talk about what fairies look like, right? So fairies are generally described as human in appearance and having magical powers, generally. But there's so many different kinds of fairies that have been reported throughout the centuries, ranging from quite tiny to being the size of a human child to being our size. Um, so they change. Some smaller fairies could expand their figure to imitate humans. For example, on the Orkneys, fairies were described as short in stature, dressed in dark gray, sometimes seen in armor. In some folklore, fairies were known to have green eyes. Some depiction show them wearing footwear, other times they're barefoot. Fairies wearing wings, for the most part, that is a Victorian addition, right? Fairies live in a place called Fairyland. But where is Fairyland, right? Where is this Fairyland? Let's talk about where is this Fairyland? Sometimes it is just over the horizon, or it's just beneath our feet. Yet, as people occupied and started to settle out in various areas, Fairyland usually was this place just beyond that. For instance, the Welsh thought that Fairyland was located in the north part of their mountainous land, and then they in the mysterious rocky peak, and then they started to move that to the west, and then later on it was moved to an island, a mysterious island lying in the Irish Channel. This island was sometimes seen by sailors, sometimes even landed upon, and then it would disappear. Nevertheless, its fairy inhabitants were said to frequent the markets throughout Wales, for example, Milford Haven. So, they came to shore and showed themselves pretty apparently. The Irish have this fairyland as this phantom isle called Hay Brazel. For them, it lay to the west. According to their beliefs, the island rises to the surface every 7 years, right? The island is usually depicted as round, divided in two by a wide river, which is kind of like Plato's description of Atlantis. I think that's fascinating. While some of these islands are submerged, some of these islands attributed to being fairyland are floating high in the air. So we have many of these. Of course, you have also. What about Avalon, right? So now there was. I'm going to tell you a fairyland story. I'm going to tell you a few of these right here, but there was a certain Mananan, Mananan, Manannan, Mananan, who was the son of Lur, who, as the chief deity of the sea, held sway over many of the islands, and basically, it was he who summoned a certain Bran, son of Feeble, to a place, a mysterious place called Imhane, which is the land of, well, it's a land of fairy women. So, okay, so this was believed to be this very amazing country in the sea that was held up by four huge bronze pillars. The journey had Bran pass the island of the light, where everybody was intoxicated once you arrived on land, right? So you don't have to get drunk. All you had to do is just land on this island and whoop, you're out. When they reached Emheim, they found that it was a pretty beautiful place, lush and rolling hills, tall green grass, and of course surrounded by women, these fairy women. After a year had passed, they began the others, along with Bran, started to go. You know what? I think we want to go back home, at least visit home. And the women said, "Well, yes, you can go back home, but you cannot set foot on dry land. Okay, so you can go home. That's no problem, but you can't set foot on dry land." So, of course, they returned back to Ireland, right? And so Bran, they arrive at this place, and Bran's companions waded ashore because they just couldn't. They didn't want to listen to the advice of these women. So they're going, ah, you know what? And they waded ashore, and once they arrived on the shore, they immediately turned to dust. They immediately turned to dust. And of course, the story is that Bran then turned away and disappeared. There's so there's another story. There's quite a few of these here, but here it is. One of the few men to be invited to another mystical place known as Turnan Ulg, another fairyland. His name was Oisin, or Ishi, son of Finn. He was of the legendary Finian warriors of Ireland. The Finians were out hunting one day when suddenly there appeared a lady of great beauty, and she approached them, and they were completely in awe. Her name was Niam of the golden hair, daughter of Mananan, right? And she chose Oisin from amongst all of them to be her lover. So he is especially selected to be taken away, right? So she told him to mount up upon her fairy steed, and they rode over the land to the sea, and then across the tops of the waves towards the enchanted island of Tirnam Og, which was, of course, it says, the most delightful country to be found, or the greatest respite under the sun. They saw beautiful sights as they journeyed, fairy palaces that appeared on the surface of the sea. And at one point, Niam asked Oisin to free a Danian damsel who was a prisoner of a demon of the deep sea, and he did so. Soon they arrived at this beautiful land of the fairies of the young, and he remained with his lover for 300 years. And then he remembered that he wanted to visit home again and the Finians. And so he longed to go back. So Niam furnished him with a fairy steed for the journey, but he warned him that you cannot put your feet, once here, upon earthly soil. And so actually, he tried not to do that. He did. He arrived along the shore, and people have heard of him before, but obviously it's 300 years earlier. And what happened is, there's a long story short, but he accidentally fell while close to the shore onto land. He didn't. He didn't die. He turned into an ancient blind old man. And he also realized the world had become quite different because St. Patrick had arrived and Christianity had arrived. And, and so St. Patrick supposedly took in this blind man, Oisin, and tried to convert him to Christianity. And he called him all about heaven. Well, Oisin replied he could not conceive of heaven that would not be as beautiful where he has been. And he wished to be with his Fenians. And he politely told St. Patrick, no, I don't want to do this. And so there you have it. And of course, you have Avalon is another very famous fairy island. Of course, King Arthur and is connected to be there, right? When he's mortally wounded, to be tended by the 4 fairy queens, right? And so there you have it. Now, fairy, let's move on here. So we kind of idea of the fairyland. Fairy can reveal themselves as bright and glittering without warning anywhere and then suddenly disappear. So they could just appear and then disappear any place, in forests and fields and swamps, right? Now, where do they live? Right? Well, they live in ancient earthworks. They live in forts. They live in barrows, right? These are the homes of the fairy. In fact, the fairy are sometimes called the She, which means the people of the hills. So at night, it is said that fairy hills are often seen ablaze with myriad of sparkling lights. Sometimes what will happen is you'll see a fairy light on a hill, and then it will disappear, and then it'll appear at another fairy hill nearby, and then disappear, and then move to another fairy hill further off. In fact, there are these fairy hills, these fairy places where the fairies occupy, these settlements, right, are sometimes connected to these roads, these fairy routes. There are fairies specifically that are called the Hogmen or the Hillmen, who are the most feared. And they believe that the best way to go from one fairy hill to another fairy hill is to go directly through a fairy path. Well, over the millennia, there is what will happen is these paths supposedly are cut through from place to place, like fairy superhighways, and there's accumulation of energy along these highways, and the energy is even further accumulated at various junctures or crossways. And so the best thing to do is obviously is not to have any kind of habitation along these routes. Now, there are certain times, and I'm going to go ahead and tell you, certain times where you should be very careful of fairy paths, because what happens is they quickly move from these hills, these settlements. One time is on Lammas Tide on August 7th. On August 7th, they're on the move. So you may be trampled over by a bunch of fairies if you cross a fairy path on August 7th, right? Another day is November 11th, which is Holland-tide, right? So that's another time where you got to watch out because the fairies are on the run and they may run you over. It is definitely not recommended to invade a fairy hill. There's lots of stories that are attributed to this, that we shouldn't do this. Now, there's nothing wrong with discreet observation. In fact, somebody who watches in a friendly way may even be rewarded. If, however, the fairies seem reluctant to emerge from their hill, the entrance may be discovered by walking around the hill 9 times at full moon. So if you want to see where the entrance area is, you want to see where they're, you're not allowed to go in. But if you want to observe them, supposedly, you have to walk around the hill 9 times. I give you the wrong advice. 9 times at the full moon in a clockwise position. And then the entrance will be revealed. But anyway, so be very careful. For those who are brave enough, you may actually enter the fairies. You can't enter the fairies' home, but you can put your ear supposedly at the door. Besides being used as an abode to live in, the hollow hills are hiding uh, various treasures. They're hiding gold and silver and all kinds of things. So, in fact, some of the traditional so-called fairy hills, we have realized that there are actually treasures inside, along with skeletons. And of course, these are ancient burial hills, but they are reinterpreted as fairy hills. Fairies go to great pains to protect their homes and their gold. Treasure seekers will be chased off forthwith, right? Okay, so clearly one cannot invade the chosen habitat of fairies, all right? So you have to be very careful. But here's another problem. It is a problem. And that is that you got to be careful not to build anything that is on a fairy, right? Be very careful. So, in fact, it is claimed that these little people are capable of moving houses, churches, and even castles if they object to its locations. Um, Houses that are placed across a fairy path may serve disturbances. There's one story where this house, part of its corner, crossed a fairy path, and so the house shook constantly as fairies supposedly hit that side of the house over and over again. So what do? Uh, they cut off that corner, they kind of smoothed it over, and they had no more disturbances. In other cases, you have, you spend a lot of money, you purchase this beautiful house, and it turns out to be right in the middle of the fairy path. Well, fairies don't move during the day; they move during the night. And so, what is recommended is, hey, you bought property and it's a fairy path. What they recommend that you do is at night you keep your front door and your back door open, and that way the fairies can go right through without disturbing anybody. I'm not sure how that works when it comes to safety. Keeping your front door and front and back door open, and within many houses that are designed like in Ireland and Wales, the front door and the back door are actually parallel to one another, perhaps to facilitate this need for them to cross over. Right now, sometimes the fairies invite you in. They do, right? Supposedly, right? And then they'll, and if they invite you, be very cautious. Yeah, very unless you're in Wales. That's another story. We'll talk about that. So be very careful. But you definitely refuse all offers of food and drink. Okay, so because if you take fairy food, then you are perpetually enslaved, and that's it for you, right? Also, you gotta watch out for fairy music. The fairy melodies are absolutely beautiful, but they're plaintive, and yet they're very wild, capricious, right? And so when mortals hear their music, oh, they love the music. We love the music. It's something that's so sublime and mysterious and, well, enchanting, right? But here's the problem. The lull of the music can put you to sleep, and it can put you to sleep forever. It can kill you. Be careful, right? Also, it can make you forgetful, make you have feelings of melancholy. After you hear the music, you don't know what to do. You got to hear it again, and the music is gone, and you slowly wither away, right? And you because it is this constant reminder of such beauty that is unattainable, that you can't capture, right? Okay, so gotta watch out for fairy music. I'm fairly certain about that. Also, beyond the fairies' passion for music, they all love to dance. Whether good or evil, elves and fairies, they all love to dance. And the common form of dancing is a circular dance. They dance in a circle. Uh, and the little people, if they have no partners, they leap and twist around in circles. But other times it's kind of like the do-si-do, right? It's they're dancing together, right? And but you have to be very careful about joining their dance. There's some problems that could happen unless you're Wales. In Wales, I know Wales is the exception. Be careful. So there's a tale of a certain shepherd. His name is Tudor, who came across a troop of fairies dancing to the music to a very tiny fiddler. Tudor tried to resist the enchanting strains, but finally he threw his cap into the air and shouted, "Now for it, then! Play away, old devil!" And he joined in. Immediately, according to the story, a pair of horns appeared on the fiddler's head and tails sprouted from beneath his coat. The dancing sprites turned into goats, dogs, and cats and foxes, and they spun Cooter around into this dizzying frenzy, right? This lasted all the way through the following day when Tudor was finally rescued, uh, and he was dancing around like a madman. But some pious words uh, enabled him to come to his senses. That's the positive story. There's another story of a young man called Shona Op Shinken. What happened to him? It was a fine summer's morning, and he heard the fairy melody. He sat down beneath a nice tree, and as the last strains of the music faded away, um, he he was surprised to see that the tree above him was so green before had would now look different. It looked older. In fact, it was dead. He's like, what happened? He returned home and he found that the house was kind of dilapidated. It was older, covered with ivy. And there's an old man standing in the doorway, a stranger, greeted Shauna and asked him what he wanted. Shauna replied that he left his father and mother in that very house but minutes before. The old man asked his name. He said, "Show up Shington," and replied the boy. The old man became deathly pale and replied, "I often heard my grandfather, your father, speak of your disappearance." At this utterance, Shauna Shenkin crumbled to dust at the doorway. So he heard the music, he fell asleep, and time went by. Right, so you watch out. So let's talk about one of my favorite topics: fairy rings. Right? The fairy rings. Fairies often dance in a circle in the grass, which are called fairy rings. And this, of course, oftentimes spells danger for the human passerby, right? Typically, a fairy ring occurs, it's a ring or arc of mushrooms. The rings may grow to over 10 meters or 33 feet. in diameter, and they become stable over time as fungus grows and seeks food underground. So uh, they are called, in many cases, the witches' circles in French, witches' rings, right? And certain Olaus Magnus, lived from 1490 to 1557, wrote that the brightness of the fairy ring comes not from the dancing of the fairies, who harm it with their feet, but from Puck, who refreshes the grass. Many folk believe that the rings are dangerous places, best to be avoided. Superstition says that fairy rings are sacred. You cannot violate them otherwise, and that means a farmer can't violate them now because that's going to anger the fairies. You're going to be cursed. One Irish legend recorded by Wilde tells about a farmer who builds a barn on a fairy ring. Despite the protests of his neighbors, he is struck senseless one night, and a local fairy doctor breaks the curse. The farmer says that he dreamed that he must destroy the barn, even collecting dew from the grass or flowers of the fairy ring could even bring him bad luck. So there you have that. There are numerous legends that focus on mortals that dare to enter a fairy ring, and there are consequences. Anyone who steps into an empty fairy ring will die at a young age. Accordingly, right? Um, Someone who violates a fairy parameter becomes invisible to mortals outside, and we find it impossible to leave the circle. And what will happen is the fairies will take you in their dance, and they'll make you dance and dance and dance until you die of exhaustion. Can't take it anymore. There are ways of rescuing you from this fate, but it is very difficult. Of course, one story is that somebody, plants his foot, halfway in the ring, and he puts his arm out, and he'll grab the other person to pull them out. Of course, some legends assert that the only way to investigate a fairy ring is to run around it again 9 times. Whatever you do, don't run around it 10 times because it's not going to work. So there's that as well. Okay, so fairy rings. Now, by the way, the term fairy locks is I want to bring up fairy locks. Did you know that during the Middle Ages, that a person has what's called fairy locks? Their hair is all beautiful and curly and tousled, especially when you wake up in the morning. It is believed that fairies in the middle of the night are actually curling your hair. Okay. Anyway, so fairies of England. Let's talk about the fairy. We're going to talk about fairies of England. Then we'll be talking about fairies of Scotland and Wales and Ireland. Definitely, I want to make sure we get to Wales for sure and Ireland, but because Welsh fairies are different from everything. So everything that you're learning about fairies now will be undone when we get to Wales, where you can enter a fairy circle, and everybody hangs out with fairies in Wales. And there's no danger. I mean, there's danger, but it's a good thing. People marry fairies, so it's a whole other world. Okay, but we're not fairies. So let's go to Old England. Well, fairies in England is one kind that's called a brownie. This is typically a small and shaggy man, wrinkled and brown. Sometimes he's about 25 inches in height. He's naked or dressed in tattered brown clothes, right? Brownies who are in the highlands, they have no fingers or toes. But the lowland brownies have no noses. So you can tell the difference, right? A brownie generally adopts a house, which he then looks after. So he adopts a house, and he's very devoted to your household. In fact, he will come out at night, and he will watch over the farm animals. He will reap and thresh and mow and run errands at night, and he will make himself indispensable. I mean, brownies, to have a brownie in your home in England, it's a good thing. It's a good fairy. Uh, he will willingly do the chores left undone by the servants. So if your servants, if the people who you hire are not doing the job, the brownie will fix things up. But the brownie will also find ways of scolding those who are not doing their work or their idleness. Oh, and by the way, brownies in Scotland, they'll help with the brewing of beer too. They're pretty useful. The brownies, what do they expect? What do you give a brownie? Well, you give them no more for their all the things they do for you. You give them no more than a bowl of cream or your best milk and a cake smeared with honey. Don't do anything else. Don't give them anything else. Just that. Because if you give them anything more, they will be insulted because they think that you're paying them off, or they feel like their work is done and they're just going to leave you anyway. So just all you have to do. I'm giving you pointers. I know all you guys tonight you're gonna put out your cream and your milk to pay your brownies. It'd be kind of nice if the brownies would do the house my chores out here, right? Clean up the house for me, right? Brownies originated as domestic tutelary spirits, very similar to the layers of ancient Roman tradition, right? Hello. Even the layers of the Etruscans, the Romans, right? They were hairy and dressed in rags, and they demand offerings of food and dairy. But unlike the layers, the brownies were to go from place to place. They can go from house to house, while the layers were connected to the ancestral home, and they didn't typically move from place to place. There's a few differences there. So those are the brownies. Let's move to the pixies. The pixies sometimes take the form of hedgehogs. They are usually depicted with, pointed ears. They often wear a green outfit, a pointed hat. Uh, Sometimes they're described as wearing dirty, ragged bundles of rags, and they will happily discard these rags for new clothes. Unlike the brownies, if you give them new clothes, they're not going to leave you. Okay. So the pixies also the pickish hair. Their hair kind of looks like that as well. They only get wings later on, right? So pixies are around Devon and Cornwall. Some people say that their name derives from the Picts, and so are there. It's interesting. The earliest published version of the Three Little Pigs was actually the Three Little Pixies, and so it's Three Little Pixies in place of pigs. I'll just throw that out. That was published in 1853. There is an actual Pixie Day tradition at a place called Ottery in England. And so Ottery St. Mary's, I should say, in England. And so this celebration started in 1954. And what happened was it's supposed to alleviate a situation that happened earlier. The story goes is that a long time ago, they were going to build a church, St. Mary's, and it was going to have a bell, right? A bell that was an iron bell, and then if it would ring, it would scare away, of course, all the pixies, not to anyone's benefit. So the story goes is the pixies confused those who are bringing the bell in from the church for the church, and they're about to go over a cliff. This procession holding this bell, when one of the men stubbed his toe. He says, "Oh my God!" And that broke the magic, so to speak, and they were able to put the bell in the tower. But there came to be an agreement that one time a year they would not ring the bells, and this is where they have this pixie party to this day. I want to say this about pixies. Pixies, they're very mischievous. What they do is they confuse you. They pixify us. So if they're not, yeah, they want to just play around with you. Uh, what will happen is a pixie will confuse you as you're walking across a field. You'll be walking across this field, and they'll make you go into you pixelate, right? Somebody says that they'll make you go around in circles, and so you're going, hey, there's the hedge, yeah, there's an old trusty oak, there's the brook, there's the hedge, there's the old trusty oak, there's and you could be potentially lost. So there are stories of people who are confused by pixies that just go around in circles. That's kind of scary, right? So those are the pixies. Now you have the hags. The hags, they personify winter. They're survivors from the old goddesses. Uh, like these goddesses, they go through various changes from winter to spring. They move from hideous, ugly old women into beautiful young maidens. But in some cases, they're not always good. They can be cannibalistic. And so they are like sirens, these hags, and they kind of bring you in. So you never know, right? So there you have it. So you have the hags. Um, you have those who are the goblins. These are fairies, believe it or not. They smell bad. They're malicious, and so you have them. They're tempters, right? You got the bogies. This is basically a generic name for a goblin. Some are dangerous, some are mischievous. They have shape shifting abilities. You got the boggles. You got the red caps. These are the most evil of the goblins of all. They lived in ruined towers and castles and known for their wickedness. And they have the red caps. The reason why they're red is because they drench their hats in human blood. And that's why they're red. Oh, and then you have the knockers. The knockers, yeah, you can't make this up. These are sprites that inhabit the mines in England, especially the Cornish and Devon regions. They have a habit of making knocking noises uh, that to indicate rich veins of ore. So if you're a miner, you hear this knocking sound. These knockers are actually trying to indicate that, hey, gold or silver or some kind of precious ore is located here. Now, so these knockers are beneficial, but they have this strange habit of making really ugly, and they have this habit of making really ugly, obnoxious faces, which scare people, but they think it's funny. And the other thing they like to do is like to show that they're not attractive as it is. They want to show off their nudity, So they're exhibitionists, these knockers. You just can't make this up. Anyway, so these are the knockers. These are fairies that live in the underworld to help you out. You got also the Spriggans. These are also ugly and grotesque, very ugly. They're wizened old men, but they have large childlike heads. This is just the worst nightmares. They're like they're old men, but their heads look like babies. They're large. It's like okay. So anyway, so the Spriggans and the Spriggans, they're pretty scary. Okay, these Spriggans, they will chase you around. They have really hot tempers, and they're villains. They're skilled thieves. They're very destructive. They're very dangerous. And the last thing you want to do is you approach a Spriggans hill dance because they immediately become an army and they attack you. So there you have that, right? So, and then you have what's called the Lenum Seed. They're the Isle of Man. These are blood-sucking vampire fairies from Ireland, right? But they're also the source of inspiration for muses. for poets, excuse me. So what they do, and of course, this W.B. Yeats, he pretty well created this. It's like a new ancient myth, and the idea is that these vampiric fairies, they inspire poets and musicians and artisans, and you feel, fully in the zone. But there's one problem: they slowly drain away your energy, and you die at a very young age. But you have created something masterful. So it's inside. It can be good. I mean, you create something, and that you're not going to live long enough to enjoy it, right? Uh, Many English water spirits enjoy drowning and devouring children. You have also those known as the osrae. The osrae are small and delicate female fairies who melt away into a pool of water when captured or exposed to the sunlight. So there's a story of this sailor that goes out and he finds one and tries to capture it. And she protests, and finally he's able to get a hold of her. He's looking forward to showing her off, and by the time he gets to shore, she has melted away. So it's very, very kind of very sad, very pathetic there. So okay. So now what's going to happen is, well, fairies of Scotland. I'm going to make sure we get to Wales. Scotland, in Scottish folklore, you have what's called the Seelie Court. Seelie Court. Okay, so what happens actually? There's two courts. You have the Seelie Court, and you have the Unseelie Court. The fairies are divided into two groups, although there's others besides that. So the Seelie Court, these are the beneficial fairies. They can be dangerous, but for the most part, they seek to help humans. They do warn those who offend them, and they return human kindness with kindness and give them favors. They're very fair, and they live and occupy the time of twilight. So this border region. And they are known to appear specifically on April 30th and May 1st and October 31st and November 1st. These are the friendly fairies. Then you have the Unseelie Court. The Unseelie Court, these are darkly inclined fairies. Unlike the Seelie Court, no offense is necessary for them to attack you. They just will. As opposed to Twilight, they appear at the middle of the night. They assault travelers. They actually throw them up and carry them throughout the air, beating them up and forcing them to commit such acts as shooting at their cattle. I mean, confusing them. So these are the Unseelie. What's interesting about the Unseelie is every now and then, an Unseelie fairy falls in love with you. They're bad, they're dangerous, but they're good dangerous. and they like to hang around you, and they'll protect you. So what happens is that your life is sort of good. I mean, you'll be prosperous and things will happen. You're just not going to have any friends because you have this bad luck fairy that still likes you and loves you and wants to take care of you, but is pretty selfish or will treat you much like a pet. So beware of the Unseelie. Many of these fairies, by the way, if they're women, turn into deer. You also have, of course, the Bean Nye. The Bean Nye, this is a type of banshee in Scotland. They haunt the lonely streams of both Scotland and Ireland, washing the blood-stained garments of those about to die. It is said that these spirits are the ghosts of women who died in childbirth, and that they are fated to perform their task until the day when they would have normally died. So they are this omen that we are worried about seeing, right? So there you have it. There's a few stories that I'm not going to read. Oh, I don't know if I should read this one or not. Yeah, okay. So if you want to get out of dying, you're having these spirit basically is washing bloody clothes, and you're not sure if it's for you or for your army or for the other army or somebody you care for. So the idea is that if you want to find out, you sneak up on them and make sure they don't see you, because if they see you, it's over. And you grab them. You grab a hold of them. And then you force them to turn around, and then they will tell you. Oh, all right. So some of these banshees have longer breasts, and as they're washing, it gets in the way. So they put their breasts over their shoulders. It's probably part of the speech you're going to remember, right? You put their breasts over the shoulders so they can wash. And the idea is that you approach them from behind, and you act as a child, and in every way, like the breastfeeding thing, and that will soothe them, and they'll tell you whatever you want. Okay, so remember that one. So, you got to worry about, if you're Scottish, I'm sorry, got these various interesting traditions. So there you have it. Okay. You have also that which is known as the Glastic. The Glastic, this is a Scottish water fairy, which is part seductive woman and part goat. The Glastic lures men to dance with her before she feeds a vampire-like on their blood, right? So there you have it, the Glastic. Now, the Glastic are sometimes associated with the Green Lady, as you know. Um, so there you have it. I know I wish I could talk more about her. Oh, we have the Shelly Coat. The Shelly Coat. This is a Scottish bogie who haunts freshwater streams and is covered with shells, which clatter when he moves. And he takes pleasure in tricking and bewildering travelers and leading them astray in Shelly Coats. It's kind of cool, covered with shells. You have the Kelpie. Now, the Kelpie, this is a Scottish water fairy as well. And it shows itself because you got to play both sides. It's not just you have women that are lured by these kelpies. They are sometimes appear in the guise of a hairy man, a handsome hairy man, that oftentimes also takes on the form of a horse. Okay, so sometimes a kelpie retains its hooves when it appears as a human. A kelpie haunts rivers and streams, and after letting unsuspecting humans melt him, will dash them into the water and give them a good ducking. But the thing is that some people say that the origins of this particular kelpie was from the ancient sacrifices where they would take a horse and a human and they'd sacrifice it in a body of water to appease the water spirits. Yeah, and so this could be the origin. Well, by the way, sometimes they betray their presence because they have water weeds in their hair. So there is one story. There's actually a few stories where women have decided that they would like to spend the rest of their life with a handsome kelpie as a human. Okay, so here we go. There is a folk tale from Bara. It tells of a lonely kelpie that transforms itself into a handsome young man, and he woos a pretty young woman who he was determined to take as his wife. But what happens is, as a young man, he's there sleeping as a young man, he has on him a bridle. And what she does is that if she takes off his bridle, he will become a horse. So what she does, as he's sleeping after they've had their moment, she takes the bridle, and he becomes a horse, and then she brings the horse back to her father, and makes him work as a horse for an entire year. Then She consults a wise person to ask about, she wants this Kelpie, she wants this handsome man. Um, and so the wise person says, give him back the bridle and let him make a decision. And so the girl gives the bridle back, turns into a man, and says, would you agree to marry me? And the Kelpie says yes, and he becomes mortal forever, and they live happily ever after. So there's the Kelpie story. So you have quite a few of these. Of course, you have also the Silkies, right? The Silkies. These are found in Orkney and Shetland Harbor, and basically a female Silkie is able to discard her seal skin and come ashore as a beautiful maiden. If a human can capture the skin, the Selkie can be forced to become a fine, if not wistful wife. However, you got to always hide the skin. If she discovers the skin, then she'll immediately disappear and go back to where she was before. Okay, make sure we get to the fairies of Wales, because I want to make sure we have a nice contrast to it. So the Welsh fairies, Tylwyth Teg, right? The Welsh, they are described as all different kinds of looks. They're described as fair-haired, and they sometimes are said to covet golden-haired children who they are said to kidnap, leaving changelings in their place, right? So that's not very positive for us. But other times, they're quite friendly and kind, and they dance, they make fairy rings, and they live underwater or under the ground in many cases. And in Welsh tradition, fairy maidens may become the wives of human men. Yeah, they may, right? So in these stories. So, yeah, so there you have it. I'll say a few stories here. You have, of course, um, they're sometimes described as, other ones are described as stunted and ugly. And so you have those two. Now, when it comes to stealing children, I'm going to give you the recipe to stop that. So, for example, what you want to do is, if your child has disappeared and it's replaced by this replacement, you remove the top from a raw egg and begin stirring its contents. And as the changeling watches her do this certain aspect, she learns from various comments of where to look for the child. Then, of course, you go to the crossroads where apparently it says where it was at midnight during the full moon. If you see your kid there, then you go, okay, I have identified it. Then what you do is you get a black hen, and without plucking it, you roast it over a wood fire until every feather drops off, and your kid shall return to you. As easy as that. Okay. So in Welsh tradition, you have five general types of fairies. Okay, so you have the Elohim, and these are the fairies that inhabit, spelled Ellylyon. These are the fairies that inhabit groves and valleys and are similar to the English elves. Their food consists of toadstools and fairy butter, which basically is a kind of fungus. And they are ruled over by Queen Mob, and uh, they are they're sometimes described as hideous creatures, but 5 feet in height, so they're taller, with goggly eyes and huge mouths, covered with long hair all over, and goes leaping and jumping through the air like a gigantic grasshopper. They frequent the bogs and are pretty scary at times, and mischievous, and kind of throw you off. You have that which is known as the Albanau. These are like the ones of England, like the knockers. They help miners find the rich veins of ore or other treasures by their knocking sound, right? So they're the same in that sense. And they're very friendly and very helpful. It's interesting. You have the Valor. This is basically the British rowdy who come out at night while the owner of the house are asleep, and they perform basically the same tasks. And then you have, of course, the unknown or beautiful female fairies who live beneath lakes and rivers. Let's talk about them. And they oftentimes take the become the wives of human men. Let's tell one story. One story is recorded in a Celtic folklore by John Wrights, and he tells a story that goes back to the 12th century, where once upon a time there lived a widow, and one day she sent her son to graze their cattle on the Black Mountain Range near one of the lakes, and there he saw a beautiful maiden sitting on the surface of the lake, and she was combing her hair. He tried to court her, and he offered her some bread and cheese, but she refused. She said, "The bread, it's too hard," and she disappeared in the water. Well, she's a food critic. so, so when he returned home, he told his mom what happened, and she said, "Well, the next time, why don't you offer her unbaked bread?" So he returns back there, and once again, there she is, combing her hair, and says, "Hey," offers her the unbaked bread. She eats it, and she spits it out, and she's, "Oh, it's too soft." So he returns back to his mom and says, "Mom, didn't work." So she says, "Well, why don't we just lightly bake the bread?" He goes back, he appears again, she's brushing her hair. He says, "Oh, try this bread." Just right. And she says, "Okay." She says, "Will you marry me?" "Of course I'll marry you." Hey, you have bread lovers out there. I mean, a lot of people love bread. Apparently, she loves bread. And hey, never thought you'd have a marriage proposal being received, agreed upon based upon how well the bread is made. But hey, some bread is pretty good, right? Sourdough, getting hungry. Okay, moving right along. So she agrees, but she says that so she dives into the water, and the marriage comes about, and she has an identical twin. And so, well, the next test is you got to guess which one of us is me. So the king asks the fairies which one. So, but she kind of cheats. She moves her foot back and forth, and her laces are tied kind of strange. So he's giving hints. Now they get married. The father says that if you strike her 3 times, then she's going to leave you and disappear forever from your life. So the problem is the thing is that and we have to understand the culture, but it still doesn't excuse it. But the problem is that during weddings, she'd cry the whole time. And during funerals, she'd laugh. So it got all kind of mixed up. And so he would go to her and say, hey, don't laugh right now. He's not hitting her, but he's like, "Hey, don't do that." Well, apparently that counted as a hit. He did it 3 times. They already had kids together, but she disappeared. Right? She left. However, having said that, she still visited the kids. Still visited the kids. She'd come by the shore, see just them, and talk with them, and raise them and teach them a whole bunch of things, including medicine. It turns out the entire family, theoretically, knew medicine supposedly from the arts of the fairies, and carried on those traditions all the way down the line. And so the story goes is that it turns out that there really is a family known as the Medify of physicians that started around the 13th century, and the last one died in 1739. They were listed doctors. They're phenomenal doctors, and they claim that their lineage arrives from the fairies. It's interwoven with them. In fact, there's many Welsh families that claim a lineage back to the fairies, going all the way back, as long as they're not from Norman blood, or not from any British blood or any Irish blood, right, or any French blood. If you're Welsh, you could very well have, supposedly, theoretically, a fairy background. Why? Here we go. Because everything's opposite in Wales. What do you mean by that? In Wales, and I'll probably conclude with this little anecdote. And then, in Wales, your fairy godmother, right? Yeah, right. In Wales, the fairy circles that you're not supposed to go into. You just stay away from them at all costs. Well, guess what? That's not true in Wales. In Wales, it can be a wonderful thing. So there's stories where it says is that you go into the fairy circle, you join the fairies, they will dance with you, you're going to have a great time, and they're not going to kill you. Isn't that great? In fact, you're going to enjoy the festivities. In many cases, you can, eat their food and feast with them. There are stories, which I don't have time to tell you about, but there are stories where, Corwin, for example, there are stories where entire village was supposedly, during the Middle Ages and before, would go out and join in their festivities with the fairies, and they would choose their wives, and they would marry fairies. They would marry into their lineage. So a fairy circle wasn't a bad thing. And the other part is sometimes you enter a fairy circle and you enter Fairyland and you get married to a fairy in the other realm and you live happily ever after in the other realm. So what I find is fascinating is the closer you get to the English border, the less that's true. So in Wales, yes, there's areas that follow, watch out for fairy circles and watch out for this and watch. That's true. But there's other areas that are more deeply Welsh. And the more Welsh it is, the more the fairies are friendly and the more you could interact with them, and a good time can be had by all. So there you have it. Of course, obviously, Ireland, it's its own talk in and of itself about the fairies there. I wish I could go there. I do have the notes for it, but there's just too much to explore on that. I will just say that the fairies of Ireland are far more protective of their land, and whatever you do, don't build on their fairy hills, or you're going to get it, and lots of bad things will happen. There's one tale where there's this contest between this fairy lady and this man who is a musician, and she tries to scare him constantly, but eventually they kind of come to this happy agreement, and she'll respect him, but not without days and days of constant attacks and morphing into all these kind of scary creatures and so forth. That's just the way things are. Fairies our entire universe in and of itself, this very special elemental that connects to the isles we have explored, as well as elves. I know that there's so much more where we could go, but I want to say for right now, I want to conclude and wish you all a great evening. If you have any questions, hang on. Thank you so much. Okay. That's a lot of materials.
Yes.
Thanks, Michelle. A lot of materials covered. Any questions?
I guess question.
Yes.
In your notes on the red caps, are there any descriptions about the iron shoes, or just how fearsome they are because of that iron has no effect on them?
Okay, there's mentioned the fact that what makes them so fierce and so warrior-like is the fact that that there is no that they are, of all the fairies, the only ones that can ward off iron. But a little bit further. So so many will interpret this and as taking on. Remember, we have the Iron Age, and with the Iron Age, you're having new migrations happening, and many of these migrations, those who are in these migrations are warriors, right? So, and and funny thing is, the red caps are very much warrior fairies. They are, they're the ones that, and so does that make sense? So, and they're mischievous, they're chaotic, and they're fighters. So yeah, there's some people say that they are in a sense crossing over into the traditions of the people that came later. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people
Thank you.
they're acquiring those traditions, and therefore, so you can always tell that the majority of these fairies are scared of iron. But having said that, you're going to have elves on the mainland, the continent, that some, no iron, some iron, iron deficiency, right? Sorry. So you're going to see that there's an overlap. There's an overlap in traditions, but this idea of iron still having this special power over the spiritual world is very evident still today in England, throughout the Isles, but also into the Americas. This is why when somebody is buried, they'll have like the iron fence that's around the person who's buried to ward away, uh, you know, that which could interfere, but also to keep that spirit in. So it works both ways, right? So you're going to see across the East Coast or the Midwest, you're going to see these iron fences around the grave sites. Is that fascinating? And it connects to those superstitions. Any other question? Good question, Michelle.
I had a question about the Scottish brownies. Why do you think they're missing their noses and their digits? It seems oddly punitive for helpful spirits.
I know. Well, of course, I mean, it's not cut off. So they're just missing it. So,
Okay.
yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I have no idea. That morphology. Yeah, that would be something. Frostbite. Their nose just dropped off, right? Because, they have the highland and lowland. Yeah, I can see that, right?
Well, there you go.
Lost her fingers, but lost her nose. Wait, what? Good question. No answer there.
Yeah.
Any others? Was this pretty fun? Did you guys learn a lot of stories?
Excellent.
Did you have, I think I love the Welsh stories. I wish I could tell more of those stories, but we were, ran out of time. But, I think the Welsh fairies are pretty cool because it's like, hey, here you got England, beware, be scary, and stay away, especially from the circles and their homes. And Scotland, do the same thing. Ireland, do the same thing. And Wales is like, come on in. Thank you, Jack. Right, very informative, fun topic. Yeah, welcome it. So, and not only welcoming but intermarrying. That's all. Taking fairy wives and having. By the way, if you take a fairy wife, there'll always be male children. So, I don't know how that works, but you can see there it is. So it's all sons, and then of course the next generation you'll have daughters. So and it goes on through.
That's
So
very Tolkien. I mean, Tolkien's elves are much more Welsh elves than they are English elves.
did you notice that? Yeah.
Mhm.
So he bases a lot of his ideas on Finnish folklore and a lot of Welsh folklore. Yeah, there's a lot of little Irish there, but so because you're getting friendly fairy elves, right?
Yeah.
Where it gets a little bit less friendly.
Yeah, the Tolkien elves are dangerous, but they intermarry, and once you get to know them, they're really cool.
Yeah. And that's the Welsh elves. And so I want to say one more little fun story here, and that is that the Welsh to this day who believe in these ideas, right? The Welsh to this day believe that the fairies still come to the markets of the local small towns. So the claim is that you could tell them, they look like like goddesses, or sometimes they have the green eyes and the blonde hair, and sometimes they have jet black hair, which is interesting, and the green eyes, and they're supposedly seen around the marketplaces, buying stuff just like us because they have to eat too, and yeah. So and then other Welsh say, hey, it's part of the family line, So I feel sorry for the the Irish and the Scottish. Anybody that has like a Mick in their names, they have the banshees that follow their lines. They get stuck with a banshee, right? The Micks, right? So the banshees will tell you when people in your family are going to die, and they follow you throughout your life. And I'm thinking your families, that's a bummer. I'd rather have the Welsh lineage of fairies in your blood than have a banshee follow your family line. So, in fact, these banshees supposedly continue in to the Americas. They actually follow those mix into the into here. You just can't get rid of them, right? So there you have it. So where? So, but I like brownies. I like English brownies especially. I feel like I'm talking about food, but I mean, and even Scottish brownies, and even the Welsh brownies. I like the fact that, hey, somebody's got to do my chores for me. Somebody's got to work
Well,
for
if
me.
you leave out milk for them, I mean, then you have brownies and milk, right?
Oh, that's bad, Margie.
I'm sorry, but it's like hanging right there. I couldn't help it.
I can't mute you for that one. It's milk and brownies. You're right. Brownies and cream.
That's all I could think about when you were talking about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Shutting up
Right.
now.
Just think about people coming to the door. Kids, sorry, brownies. Right.
I was a brownie and I sold cookies when I was young.
Yeah. So did you sell brownies?
Yeah, no, but I did sell Thin Mints.
Okay, Thin Mint. So yeah, so you have that too. But I do, it's all wonderful, but it's sad because some of these traditions, they're fading, so they're going away. But it's too bad. But they're reviving too. So you're having a few revivals in fairy lore, especially, has come back to a certain extent. I just want to mention that you're going to have. Let's see, give here. Have something on this. I don't want to go too much into it. But, I have so many pages here. You can believe. You've seen me before. But here he goes. Okay. Oh, we don't have the notes there. Okay, I guess the pages fell out. Yes. Okay. So you're going to have fairy lore going through a revival in the 1990s. Oh, and so it's come about again. So you're going to have many reconnecting to their to these fairy traditions. So apparently that's fairly good news. Now I'm here all day, or maybe I'm not.
Don't forget to tip your waiter.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that one in. So yeah. There's also kind of a connection. I want to mention that too. So think about their elementals, water, just like the nymphs. So there's connections there too. Any other questions? No?
When's the next lecture?
Who's asking that question?
Me.
Who is that person over there?
February 10th, the Dead Scrolls.
So I'm doing the Dead Sea Scrolls. When am I doing that?
February 10th.
Ooh, that's going to be a good one.
I am told that I am going to be doing the Dead Sea Scrolls on February 10th. So that's pretty cool. So I'll go ahead and give you my insights, since I've known many Dead Sea Scroll scholars before, and I've actually worked on a project related to the Dead Sea Scrolls. So I can give you some pretty interesting inside scoops of things about the Dead Sea Scrolls that you may not have known. So that will be fun. So that's February 10th. What's the next one?
And then February 27th. Wait, I
24th.
24th. Thank you.
Ancient Jewish magic.
Yes. And there's a link to sign up.
Yeah, I'll do Ancient Jewish Magic. Oh, that's going to be a lot of fun. I always enjoy doing that one every time. So people don't think about the importance of ancient and medieval Jewish magic as part of a tradition that sometimes continues to this day. So, so there we go. So apparently, I told Terry this. I think next month it's more like Judaism. You got the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Actually, yeah.
And you got the Jewish magic. So, what can I say? So there we go.
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts before we close off? All right. You are released.